So now we're going to talk about the circulatory system, which is the fluid system of your body. So the circulatory system is a little bit like our own internal ocean. It's always moving and changing, and we can be up to 60% water. So these waterways reach into every corner of our body. And so understanding the workings of this, or having a sense of what's a part of it, is helpful for us in terms of understanding asana, particularly asana-like inversions, and how those can affect our health and well-being. So this is going to help us in poses where we kind of turn our waterways upside down to understand what exactly is going on. So we're going to look at the two circulatory systems of the body, describe the cardiovascular system, look at what an inversion is, and describe how inversions might impact these two different systems. Yes, and then think about modifications that we might be able to offer people. So there are two different sort of waterway systems in the body. One is the cardiovascular system, and the other one is the lymphatic system. So the cardiovascular system is, most of us kind of know about this, and this is, cardio is related to what? Heart. The heart, yes. Vascular is related to your blood vessels. So this is how your heart and connected to all of those different vessels in your body that move your blood all around. So this is throughout like every part of our body. But this is interesting. It's a closed system. And what I mean by closed system is that the liquid is always contained within tubes. So the liquid, your blood, is never outside of those tubes unless there's a problem. So your blood is traveling through like every part of your body. And in fact, every cell in your body is like a cell's distance away from a capillary. So this suffuses your entire body and your whole system. And yet it's all contained within these little tube structures. So blood doesn't go outside of your tubes unless you have something like a bruise or a stroke, right? So a bruise is when blood has escaped because of impact or whatever. It has escaped its little, vessel network and gotten out into the surrounding tissue, and that's not how it's supposed to work. Does that make sense? So even though you have a lot of blood in your body, it's all contained in its own little highway system. So, in fact, we'll look at the next picture in a sec. So what's the function of your blood? What does it help you do? Remove toxins. Like what kinds of toxins? What's the big one? Pollution. Well, yeah. Yes, but what's with the toxin? What's the waste product that your body creates all the time? CO2, carbon dioxide. So that's the big one, right? So it removes that, and what does it? Booze to start. Huh? I said booze. I think that's more your liver, because sort of your booze. So what else does your blood do? Helps remove waste, cellular waste. Transports oxygen, right? So it takes oxygen to your cells, which is important. It helps to regulate the pH of your body, plays a role in regulating blood pressure, so your vessels can get bigger or smaller and help to control your blood pressure. Helps to regulate your body temperature. So when we talk about anatomy of the heat, it's going to be interesting to look at how your cardiovascular system actually helps you do that. So here's a little picture from Body Worlds. And the point of this picture is to help you see how pervasive this structure is in your body, this system is. It's like if we only had your blood vessels and we removed everything else and we stood you up and we looked at you, we could probably still recognize you, although you would look sort of red. And you'd look weird, obviously, but we could still see your body shape. Like you have think about when you cut yourself and blood immediately comes out. Imagine this system. This system is like all through your body, like a whole network, a net. And some of the blood vessels are bigger, as you can see, and then some of them are like microscopic. Like you just sort of see this red fuzzy stuff. Your capillaries are super small. But every cell in your body has to be really close to a capillary because all your cells need oxygen and to get rid of CO2. So for that transfer to happen, it's through your whole body. It's amazing. So there are some systems of your body that are pervasive in this way. This is one of them. This is like pervasive everywhere in your body. You go, you're going to find this stuff. Another one is your connective tissue, and the other one is your nervous system. So those three systems are like infiltrate you like a internal tree with crazy branches everywhere. So it's neat. Yeah. So if you stretch, here's a fun fact. If you stretched all your blood vessels out into a single line, how many kilometers do you think it would be? 50. Anyone else? I don't know where I got this information from. I can't remember now. 100,000 kilometers. Now it would be microscopic, a bunch of it, because it's capillaries, but that's how, like, isn't that amazing? Whoa. All right. So blood is, we sort of talked about this, blood is important because all cells need oxygen to survive. Without oxygen, your brain will die in 45 minutes. 4 to 5 minutes, not 45. Unless you cool it down or you're a free diver who's trained yourself, you're not gonna do well, right, after a few minutes. So oxygen is essential. Oxygen is carried by hemoglobin in red blood cells. So there's tons of stuff that's also transported around in your blood: hormones, waste products, electrolytes, proteins, vitamins, white blood cells. How much blood do you think is in your body? About. Of course, it's different depending on how big you are, but 2 liters? Imagine your soda. Imagine your liter bottles of soda. Up. Like 5 liters, I think. Maybe if you're bigger, you would have more blood. And what's crazy is that women, when they're pregnant, doesn't their blood volume increase by like 50% or something crazy like that? It goes up. It's crazy. They have so much more liquid. So, here's another fun fact. Blood is considered, first of all, it's considered a connective tissue, interestingly enough. Just like your bones are a hard connective tissue, your blood is a liquid connective tissue. And we haven't figured out how to replace blood yet, which is why we need blood donations. Yeah. So blood is made of plasma, which is just kind of like this yellowish sort of fluid matrix. Red blood cells, and that's what gives it its red color. So, yeah, I think that that's been magnified, I think, like 600 times. So you can see our blood looks red, but it's actually kind of clear, but the red blood cells are what make it look so red. So blood gets transported around in different sorts of tubes, basically. And we give even though the tubes are all interconnected, we give them different names depending on kind of where they are and whether they're going away from the heart or to the heart. So in order of kind of bigness, the arteries moving away from the heart are the biggest. The arterioles are smaller, and then the capillaries are like the little microscopic, almost filaments. And that's where oxygen exchange occurs. And then going back to the heart after the capillaries, then they start getting bigger. You have your venules, and then your veins are the largest. But it's like, these are names, but all of this is connected. It's a little bit like connective tissue. It's not like you have one thing and then another thing starts. It's kind of like they go from biggest to smallest and then from smallest to biggest, but it's all one connected network. So let's take a closer look at how your blood vessels are a little different depending on, what they're doing. So your arteries, when they leave the heart, they're able to withstand. So if your heart's pumping out blood, your arteries need to be able to withstand higher blood pressure. So they contain elastic fibers and smooth muscle cells that help to move that blood along. So arterial spray, arterial spurting, like the contraction, like the right? So they help to contract to move your blood. Think about it, because you're moving all this blood all the way around. Capillaries have lots of surface area. Now they're small, they're only like the width of a cell. And this is where, so your blood, because there's so many of them, your blood pressure drops in the capillaries because there's more surface area, there's more space. These infiltrate your whole body. And then veins, as they come back, are thinner than your arteries because they don't need to withstand as high blood pressure. And they have one-way valves that help to keep the blood from backflowing. So if you imagine, for example, I'll show you on me. The blood pressure is much lower, so by the time the blood actually drops back into your heart, your blood pressure at that spot is almost like zero. It just kind of like plunks back in. So your veins have these valves that prevent backflow. So you can see this. I got nice veiny hands for you. Can you guys see my veins? Okay. So what happens is that if you imagine against gravity now, that this blood is going up my arm, correct? So it's like, that's a lot of pressure if there's not something to help it. Because it's like, you gotta shove it all the way up against that big fluid column, right? So in your veins, you have these little backflow valves which allow blood to flow up but not to backtrack down. When they're broken, you get things like varicose veins. So I can find a valve and squish it. Can you see there's where a valve is? So if I smush out my vein, you can see that. You guys can try this on yourself. Let me find a nice longer one. There, that's a good one. Can you see how it's squishy? Because I'm blocking off the blood from going up. Here. So you can kind of play with yourself and see where your valves are. Right? Probably there. See? And you can see where it backflowed down to. So that's kind of fun. And then if you watch this blood is pooling because gravity is kind of encouraging it to be down. But as soon as I flip my hand up, my veins disappear because all the blood goes and drops down. And that's kind of what happens in your head too. Like when you stand up, right, it goes plunk because we're in gravity. Plunk. So we'll talk a little bit about blood pressure and why you get lightheaded. So there's two circuits in your cardiovascular system. One is from your heart to your lungs, and the other is from your heart to your whole body. So which do you think has to be stronger? Needs more oomph. Yeah, right? Obviously, right? So if I'm just pumping from my heart to my lungs, the blood doesn't have to go as far. But if I'm trying to get blood through my whole body, that's got to be a little bit stronger. So the pulmonary circuit, which is the heart-lung circuit, is basically taking deoxygenated blood from your lungs, pumping it out into your lungs to pick up new oxygen and bringing it back to the heart. And then the systemic circuit is taking that oxygenated blood, pumping it through your body to oxygenate your cells, and then coming back, bringing the deoxygenated blood back to your heart. So one of them is going from your heart to your lungs, and then your heart through your body. You know, so it's kind of going, those two things are going all at the same time. So the life of a little blood drop. So a little deoxygenated little piece of blood starts in your heart, it goes out to your lungs, gets oxygenated, it comes back, and then it gets pumped down through your whole body, comes back, and then it starts the whole thing all over again. Your heart is 4 chambers. And it's made of special cells, which when we looked at muscle cells, we looked at how they just keep going. They're indefatigable. And the atriums collect the blood and the ventricles pump the blood out. And if you want to see, has anyone seen the heart dance? Has anyone heard about this, the heart dance online? Okay, so my anatomy teacher, Gil, has this heart dance where he actually created this movement to show the life of a blood cell. Like out to the lungs and back, and then out into the body and back. It's super fun. So if you want to nerd out on that, you can watch that. He describes it very well. So as we were talking about earlier with the veins and these valves, it prevents backflow. So here's the thing. There's not a lot of oomph to get things back to your heart. So this is one of the reasons. See, you can see the little channels here, the little valves. So the blood comes up and then chunk. The next time it goes through chunks. So it doesn't have to go all the way up. It just has to go this little distance, one at a time. But this is one of the reasons why, if you say, you know those Swedish guards or the British guards who are hanging out at the Museum of London or Buckingham Palace or wherever they are? Okay, or soldiers, they will faint if they're just standing for too long. So if you just stood and didn't move for a long time, you keel over. And the reason is that, well, let me ask you this. Why does fainting happen? Why do we faint? Lack of oxygen to where?
The brain.
The brain. So what is the body trying to do when you faint?
Get you horizontal so that...
Exactly. Because look at this. Like my head is up here. Your brain eats 20% of the oxygen that you take in. It is oxygen, bless you, hungry. So your heart has to pump blood up to your head. It's got to go against gravity. The feet do not have this problem. But you got to get blood up to your brain. So if there's not enough blood, if there's not enough oxygen getting up to your head, your body is going to lay you out flat, right? So that it doesn't have to work hard to get the blood to your head anymore. It just kind of goes there. Does that make sense? Because we're in gravity. So what happens is that these soldiers standing around all the time, the blood starts to kind of just pool downstairs. It's harder for it to get back up. And if they're standing there long enough, then there's not enough blood kind of in your system going up to your brain, and your brain's like, this is not good, and it lays you out flat so that the blood then can just be even. Because if you're just standing there for a while, one of the things that helps get your blood back up to your heart so it can be repumped through your system is muscular contraction. So when we're walking around, running around, doing all these things, the contraction of our muscles helps to squish these veins and get everything squirting back up. But if you're just standing there and you're not contracting your muscles and you have to be stock still, then it's not being helped. So your body's like, we don't like that. It's going to lay you flat. That's one of the reasons that in order to train soldiers to stand for long periods of time, they train you to contract your muscles, right? Right? So if you contract your muscles, that helps get the blood squishy back up to your heart where it can be recirculated. So varicose veins are when those valves break and the blood kind of pools. So I guess they laser them. I guess that's what happens now. People laser your stuff.
Or the collapsing.
It depends on the size of them, I think.
Yeah?
There's foam and
Foam stuff.
sclerosing things.
Oh my goodness.
So then does it just go to a different pathway? Like when that vein has been collapsed?
You mean if someone collapses your vein as a treatment?
Yeah.
I guess there's lots of pathways back, right? So, yeah. All right. Let's see, anything else we want to talk about here? So, yeah, we'll leave our fainting and hot for later this afternoon. Any questions so far? So far, so good. Okay. So let's look a little bit at blood pressure. So your body is generally pretty well attuned to regulating your blood pressure. Blood pressure is the measurement of the force that blood makes against your blood vessels. So it's not uniform through your whole body. Like as we talked about, when it gets back to your heart, your blood pressure is actually quite low, whereas leaving your heart, your blood pressure would be higher. So the blood pressure, when you measure it, it has two different numbers because you're measuring it when the blood is pumping out against the blood vessel wall and then when your heart is relaxing. So you're measuring it when it's full of blood and then when it's not so full. I mean, it has blood in it all the time, but you're measuring it when it's high pressure and then low pressure because the heart goes pump, pump, right? So you're measuring it, usually we measure it in the upper arm, which is measuring the blood when it's in your brachial artery close to your heart. So blood pressure naturally has a range. There's a range of, kind of numbers that are okay. But what happens is that if your blood vessels get stuff inside them and they harden, then the blood will have a higher pressure. So over the short term, your blood pressure changes when you exert yourself, right? So it increases, or when you're relaxed, it's going to go down because your body doesn't need to work as hard to fuel your cells. Like if you're out for a jog, I would imagine your blood pressure is going to go up because more of your cells need more oxygen, and that's going to increase it. Over the long term, so that's short-term activity, your blood pressure and your heart rate will change. Over the long term, your blood pressure may increase if it gets coated in plaque and hardens. So when the space inside the arteries decreases, then there's more pressure. So if you have high blood pressure, then your heart has to work harder to push your blood through the arteries, which can be hard on the heart over time. So, if you're pushing something through a small little tube, it's going to require more force than a bigger tube. Right? Does that make sense? Ladies, do I have anything to add to that? Do I have that? Okay. So, why do we faint? So we've talked a little bit about why we faint, which is that the brain needs oxygen, which is carried in the blood. So gravity is a force that can keep it down. So feeling lightheaded or faint is often a sign that there's not enough blood, oxygen getting to our head, and our body wants us to put our head down. It's good. So most faints are caused by this is interesting, by an overstimulation of the vagus nerve, which regulates your blood pressure and your heart rate. Just to touch on the heat a little bit. So one of the ways that we regulate our body temperature is by sending blood to the surface of our skin. So when you get hot, or when we do a hot yoga practice, the blood gets sent more to the surface of the skin, away from the core of the body, in order to dissipate heat. Whereas, when you get cold, your hands get really cold and your feet get cold because the blood is pooling more into the core of your body where it's needed. So if we have a lot of blood that's in the extremities because it's trying to cool, that's less blood that's kind of in the core, and that's less blood that's just getting to your head in any given moment. So in a hot practice, we will tend to get more lightheaded by standing up quickly. We'll tend to be like, whoa. Like, that's why in hot, people faint more frequently than they would in a regular cool class, because more of the blood is taken up, being cooled off in the extremities, and less blood is in the core of the body. So in hot yoga, fainting tends to be something that as teachers we need to be more aware of than other styles of yoga. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you're wondering, why do I get feel faint in hot yoga but not in a hatha class, that could be why. If you're dehydrated, your blood volume is lower. So if you go to a hot class and you've just had like a ton of coffee and diuretics and alcohol, and the liquid in your body is literally lower, then that's another reason why you might feel faint. This is why in hot it's important to be hydrated. A lack of muscular engagement. So remember those soldiers, right? So if you're just standing still and you're not engaging your muscles, the blood isn't getting more oomph to move around your body. So also post-inversion, so if you've been upside down for a long time and then you suddenly stand up and the blood goes funk and you go, whoa. People with low blood pressure, that is it's not as high to push it up to your head, right? So if you've got low blood pressure and you suddenly come out of an inversion or stand up suddenly and the blood that's up here drops, and it's kind of like drops down, and there's not enough blood kind of going up so quickly, then you might feel lightheaded. So people with low blood pressure, it's fine for them to do inversions, but when you stand up or you come out of it, it might take longer for enough blood to get up to your head so that you don't feel faint. So you just need to come out of those things slowly or stand up slowly. So when we're doing things like sun salutations, let's bring it into yoga, and we are forward folding and we're coming up to stand, right? Oftentimes it's useful to just come up halfway. This is why when I teach hot, I have people come up halfway and pause. You can engage your legs. That also helps. Again, muscular contraction helps to move blood. So, and then you come up slowly so that you don't just come up and then feel faint and then want to fall down. So moving more slowly can be helpful for our students. Anything to add, my medical people, about inversions? Or about blood pressure and standing up or that kind of thing? No? Okay. Just want to make sure that I'm being clear. Okay, so what is an inversion exactly?
Upside down.
So what is upside down and what does that mean?
Head below the heart.
Your head below your heart. So what are some poses in yoga that are inversions?
Forward fold.
Forward fold. Yeah, what else? Headstand. Handstand.
Crow pose.
Yeah, well, yeah, it depends. Yeah, it's your head and your heart. The way I do crow, they're a little bit more aligned. So it's not quite like that. Depends how you do crow. But yeah, a little bit. Standing splits, yeah. Plow. Peacock. Is that Pinchamayurasana? Yeah. Downward dog. So there are some inversions that we do quite casually. Forward fold, downward facing dog. We do this all the time. So an inversion is when your head is below your heart. Wheel pose, right? So all of those poses are inversions. So actually in yoga we do a lot of them. But there are some that we call inversions, which specifically are to be held there and usually require more effort. Like when we think of inversions, we think of headstand, handstand, Pinchamayurasana, Viparita Karani, legs up the wall. So plow pose or shoulder stand. So those are ones that we usually think of when we think of inversions because they're deliberately kind of designed to put you there and hold you there. And they require more muscular effort. But forward fold, a regular forward fold is an inversion. So why do your feet get cold during long inversions? Exactly, because your blood is dropping down and your blood has to work to get up there, but it's really easy for it to fall away, so there's a little bit less blood in your extremities. So your brain and inversions. This is funny. Have you guys heard your brain is getting bathed in blood? Yogis sometimes say silly things. So your brain is not getting bathed in blood when you do an inversion. In fact, the blood pressure and the regulation of blood to your brain is very, very well controlled by your body. However, and your brain being bathed in blood would be a stroke. That would be very bad. So remember that your system, your cardiovascular system, is closed tubes. So we want the blood stays inside those tubes. So in your head, if you have a brain bleed, like an aneurysm or a stroke, that's when blood has gotten outside of those tubes, and that's very, very bad. So that's not a good day. So the blood pressure to your head is quite well regulated. However, that said, if you have a student who has a history of stroke or has a history of these things like, very high blood pressure or unmanaged blood pressure, then it's like, why tax a system that's already compromised? So for a student who has a history of stroke, I probably would be very reluctant to put them in down dog or a forward fold, let alone a headstand. And it's not because your body can't regulate blood pressure. It can, but for me, I'd be kind of like, why should we tax a system which isn't working properly? You know what I mean? Like, for something like that, I would be more conservative. But most of the students who come to your class are healthy, can do forward fold, can do down dog, or if they have high blood pressure, it's probably regulated with medication, So it's often not really an issue, but if someone specifically says, oh yeah, I have a massive history of stroke, be like, let's do a chair practice. Let's do something different. Or you could put them with rather than them doing a taxing inversion, them just putting their legs up the wall and keeping their head in line with their heart might be a different alternative. Okay. So the benefits of inverting to your cardiovascular system, well, it's just nice, it's fun and usually challenging to do inversions from a psychological perspective. Like, what do you guys get out of trying things like headstand or handstand? They're energizing. What else?
Well, they're really challenging.
Yeah.
And they're fun.
And they're fun. It's like brings us back to being like little kids, right? And it changes our world upside down a little bit. So psychologically, there's some fun kind of, there's like an adventure aspect to trying these inversions, and that it can be very playful.
I don't know the latest on it, I haven't read anything, but like they say, for kids to be hanging upside down and doing things like that, they're huge benefits.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to go check that out. I know I did a trapeze class last week, and it was really, really fun, and like very energizing and very invigorating, and like literally hanging with my knees off of a trapeze, which was crazy. Like I'm not a Cirque du Soleil person at all, but there was something which feels like there are benefits that we feel to inversions, which I suspect are simply not documented medically yet, that we don't understand quite why. Maybe it sounds like there is research to explain why now, but people say inversions have a lot of benefits, but I think we just don't even know quite how nice they are. But there's something to them that yogis have known about for a long time, which say that these are great poses. We just don't quite maybe know everything about why they're good. But I'm gonna have to check that out because I would like to hear that. So also being upside down is nice because it allows the valves in your veins to take a little break. So if you have all these valves in your legs, when you flip your legs upside down, all of a sudden the blood can just drop back down. That's kind of nice. It's not necessarily going to prevent varicose veins, but it's a nice thing to do for your legs. So who might be at risk when we're doing inversions? So let's think about inversions. Who might be at risk if we're... A heart attack is the heart kind of getting weird. I don't know if a heart attack would be contraindicated for inversions. Maybe, I don't know. Medically, is there a medical opinion out there on heart attacks? Yeah. But I'd say someone who has blood pressure issues that are unmanaged.
Someone who's had a heart attack or an infarction, that's probably tied into it, and that would be more the reason rather
Sorry, what'd you say?
The blood pressure problems related to
Yes.
having a heart attack would then be
Right.
the reason not to.
Yes, because there is going to be a different kind of taxation on your cardiovascular system and then on your heart, on your blood pressure. So like some blood pressure stuff, stroke stuff, that would be a reason probably not to invert, just because, again, it's like, why tax a system that's not working properly? One thing I want to, so a pregnant lady whose blood volume has really gone up. Now, it's not that it's bad to invert for most of your pregnancy, but if you have a massive amount of blood in your system and fluid in your system that you did not have 2 months ago or 3 months ago, then it might feel really intense to be upside down and have all that fluid kind of like dropping to your hands and to your head. So if you haven't had an inversions practice before you're pregnant, it might just not be the time to start it up.
Also, your balance will be different and you'll risk falling out. I know that's your
Yes.
well practice.
Totally, right. And we'll look at that a little bit more when we do prenatal, about all the interesting changes that happen to women.
Do you guys remember, is it shoulder stand? You know, where you're laying down and your legs are up?
Yeah.
And I remember like years ago, they'd always say, anyone who's menstruating, like, don't take this pose.
Let's talk about that.
I thought that was so weird.
It's so weird. Let's talk about, I call this the red tent conversation. The red tent. If you're on your moon cycle, don't invert. Have you heard that? I hate that, it makes me angry. So there's no medical reason to not invert when you're menstruating. Like, the blood's not going to rush back up into your uterus and cause a problem. Not a problem.
But it just helps float faster.
Well,
Don't go upside down.
I don't even know. Like, I think the real reason for me and from a yogic perspective is that there are different energetic flows in the body. Like energetic flows, upward flowing energy, downward flowing energy, right? And so the energy of menstruation is downward flowing energy, which is apana, downward flowing energy. And so we want to kind of keep that going. So when you flip upside down and you're kind of flipping that energy on its head literally, then we're not kind of going with the flow and going down. But that's more of an energetic thing. I just want to distinguish between medical danger and energetic stuff. Is energetic stuff going to screw you up? I don't think so. Like, I've had teachers, but honestly, like, if you're in a really heavy day of your period, you probably don't want to invert anyway, right? You're like, I don't feel like it. I'm crampy and grouchy. Don't want to do it. And I like the feeling. You can kind of feel it in your body. You might like the feeling of things moving downwards and being upright rather than being upside down. Like, so that might be a feeling. But in terms of how we articulate it in class, I think you can caveat it all by saying if there's any reason that you don't wish to be upside down, then don't go upside down. Rather than saying, like, if you're on your moon cycle, then do a hip opener. And then you've got poor Magdalene who's like, I guess I'll do pigeon, like feeling like everyone knows that I'm, right? So there's ways as teachers that we can be more sensitive to offering students outs for lots of reasons, which might be menstruation and wanting to keep that energetic flow going down. And or it might be like, hey, Steph just had wrist surgery and doesn't want to do a handstand, right? So, okay. So, but it's okay. Like, medically, it's not a problem to invert when you're menstruating. So, we've looked at the blood, the cardiovascular system. Let's talk about the other fluid system of the body, which is your lymphatic system. So your lymphatic system helps to clear away the extracellular space of your body. It prevents, clears the body of waste and bacteria. So surrounding all of your cells is like this fluid, watery matrix. So your lymphatic system basically takes that fluid, puts it through a cleaning system, and then dumps it back in. And what's interesting about the lymphatic system is that unlike your cardiovascular system, it is an open system. So you have these open tubes, right? The extracellular fluid goes into the tubes, goes through like your lymph nodes and gets cleaned out and then gets dumped back into your body. Actually dumped back into your cardiovascular system. So it's an open system. And so this system doesn't have a pump. So unlike your heart, which moves blood around, your lymphatic system is actually just reliant on movement, which is why you have a lot of lymph nodes in your armpits and your groin, because those are the parts of a body that are like moving so much, right? So this is like moving. So movement is really good for your lymphatic system because it kind of squishes all of your material, your fluid body, and gets this stuff moving around. So the skeletal muscles are particularly important in helping to move fluid through. Here's a little close-up view of the lymphatic tubes in the interstitial space, which is the space between the cells. So you can see how you got your fluid and then it moves inside there and it goes through your lymphatic system. So doing, for example, like inversions can be great for this part of your body. So if you imagine like fluid pools, right? So edema is when fluid pools where it shouldn't. So like, for example, this poor guy has got like some fluid, as you can see, where it shouldn't be. But this happens to all of us to some extent just because of gravity and fluid moving downwards naturally. Pregnant women, lots of fluid in their body, get swollen ankles, right? Because that fluid wants to descend down to the base. So doing an inversion, like putting your feet above you, is great because that fluid then is subject to gravity and will move. So if like you have someone with swollen ankles, you say, put your feet up. Well, in yoga, we get to not only put our feet up, but put our legs up, right? And maybe it's just legs up the wall, but that can be a really nice opportunity for fluid that's pooled in gravity to move back down to the center of your body. All right. So inversions can help move your fluid back to the center of the body, which is super great. Some potential risks. So here's something interesting. Is that, you know, because we are watery creatures, there are certain situations where we do not want to increase fluid pressure in different parts of our body. For example, if you have glaucoma, that means that your ocular pressure is high. I wouldn't, that's something where I would be like, don't do an inversion, because you're going to increase the fluid pressure in someone's head. If someone's just had eye surgery, I would say, let's not increase the fluid pressure in your head. So those who have hernias, like a hiatal hernia or a lot of acid reflux, turning somebody upside down and increasing the organ pressure into those structures, like, or, you know, with the stomach, pushing the stomach acid to the top, right, of your to where the esophagus meets the stomach, that might not be great if you have a lot of acid reflux. So there are reasons beyond, like, you know, maybe just heart or stroke, where we might actually caution people not to do these inversions. Like, hey, if you have acid reflux, maybe doing headstand isn't going to be so great for that acid reflux. If you've just had eye surgery, then being upside down, you know, I would even caution people with forward folds. Maybe we don't want to actually bring your head below your heart at that point. Make sense? Questions? All right.